Considering that MLB teams have 162 games to determine who goes to the playoffs each season, it's a very rare occurrence to find a wildcard race or division matchup that is still competitive heading into the final days of the season. And even if there is such a race, it's usually between two teams for one spot. But on September 28th, 2011, something incredibly special happened. Not only were the wildcard races in both leagues fully tied up heading into the final game of the season, but both of those races represented two of the biggest collapses and comebacks in September baseball history. And over the course of about 12 hours on that fateful day, baseball fans all across the country were treated to some of the greatest and most intense baseball ever played, featuring extra innings, walk-offs, and iconic moments all over the place. This is the story of the greatest day in MLB regular season history. This is Sports Oddity. Before we can get into the ridiculousness that was the last game of the regular season, we have to start things from the beginning, or at least the beginning of September. By September 1st of that season, it seemed that the playoff teams were already pretty much set in stone. In the National League, the Diamondbacks, the Brewers, and the Phillies were already running away with their respective divisions. And in the American League, the Rangers dominated the West, the Tigers dominated the Central, and in the East, the Yankees and the Red Sox were battling each other out for that top spot. And the wildcard races were just as non-competitive, with the Braves holding an 8.5 game lead over the Cardinals at the time in the National League, and the Yankees and the Red Sox being 8.5 and 9 games ahead of the Rays respectively in the American League. But then, something incredible happened during the month of September, something the likes of which we will never see again in Major League history. Over the course of that month, Boston had one of the most scandal-ridden slumps in baseball history, going 7-18 during their final 25 games, while reports started to come out about Terry Francona possibly being distracted by off-the-field issues, tensions constantly rising in the clubhouse, and most notably, a damning report that came out after the fact stating that players like John Lackey, John Lester, and Josh Beckett would go into the clubhouse during the game to drink beer and eat chicken. And while all of that was going down in Boston, the Braves were enduring a similar meltdown that was maybe not as interesting, but certainly just as devastating nonetheless, going 8-17 in their final 25. Meanwhile, both St. Louis and Tampa Bay were putting in major work. In one of the first recorded instances of Cardinals devil magic at work, the Cardinals had gone 16-10 during their final 26 games, and they woke up on the final day of the season actually tied with the Atlanta Braves. And the Rays were doing just as well on the AL side of the ledger as well, going 16-9 during that same stretch and finding themselves in a tie with the Red Sox on the final day. This would set the stage for one of the most unprecedented showdowns in MLB history during the final night of the season. 4 different games going on at roughly the exact same times that would decide the fates of 2 of the most insane playoff races ever in MLB history. But I don't think anybody could have predicted just how insane it would end up becoming. The first game to be decided that night would also turn out to be its most decisive victory. By a sheer stroke of luck on the Cardinals' end, St. Louis was scheduled to play their final series of the season in Houston, against an Astros squad that was arguably the worst team in all of baseball. And with prime Albert Pujols leading the way with his bat, the Cardinals would go on to thoroughly dismantle the Astros for 9 innings, with the game eventually ending in an 8-0 rout. But even though St. Louis had done their job on the field, it was still Atlanta that held their destiny in their hands. Because the Braves owned the season-long tiebreaker against the Cardinals, all Atlanta had to do that night was secure a victory in order to also secure their playoff spot. So with their job already done for the night, all the Cardinals could do was sit in the visitors' clubhouse and watch the Braves try to secure that victory. But unfortunately for Atlanta, that was going to be a lot easier said than done. While the Cardinals got extremely lucky by having to face one of the worst teams in all of baseball in their game, the Braves possibly couldn't have picked a worse opponent for a winner-take-all game. At the time, the Phillies were the only team with over 100 wins. They still boasted a lot of the key players from their 2008 World Series squad, and they were arguably the single best team in all of baseball. But despite this apparent disadvantage, the Braves came at the Phillies that night with everything that they had. Tim Hudson put together an excellent performance, going 6 1/3, giving up just 2 runs on 6 hits before turning it over to the three-headed monster in the Braves bullpen, with Eric O'Flaherty taking over the rest of the 7th, Johnny Venters in the 8th, and Craig Kimbrell coming on in the 9th with a 3-2 lead. But unfortunately for Atlanta, Kimbrell would end up giving up the game-tying run in the top of the 9th off a sacrifice fly by Chase Utley, and when the Braves failed to score in the bottom half of the inning, the game went to extra innings, and in fact, it would stay tied for the next 3 innings. But eventually, it would be the Phillies that would break through next, scoring 1 run off a Hunter Pence single in the top of the 13th inning. And when Freddie Freeman, Dan Uggla, and Chipper Jones failed to get anything going for Atlanta in the bottom half of the inning, the collapse was finally complete. Over the span of just 4 weeks, the Braves went from 8.5 games up in the wild card race to being eliminated from the playoffs entirely, leaving the fans and players at Turner Field in a state of stunned disbelief, and the visitors' locker room at Minute Maid Park in Houston was turned into the site of a massive party, one celebrating the spoils of devil magic. But even though the wild card race in the National League was finally figured out, that still left yet another wild card race in the American League that was still being decided. And unlike the National League race, it was going to be a lot more difficult for the underdog to pull off the comeback. In the American League race, we saw a similar matchup scenario playing out, but this time with the matchup luck seemingly reversed. In this case, while the Red Sox got to take on the last place Orioles in their matchup, the Rays would have to defeat the division-leading Yankees in order to secure their playoff spot. And a lot like the Braves, all the Red Sox had to do was win their game or have the Rays lose theirs in order to secure their playoff spot. And even though they weren't dominating their inferior opponent like the Cardinals did, the Red Sox were still in a pretty good spot for most of the night. Jon Lester put up a really strong outing for the Sox, going 6 innings and giving up just 2 runs on 4 hits. And heading into the latter half of the game, the Red Sox were up 3-2. But just as Boston was about to put the finishing touches on their season, Mother Nature decided to intervene in Baltimore, and a massive downpour caused a long rain delay. At that point of the night, it was looking like the final score of that game wasn't even going to matter anyway, because at the time the rain delay started, the Rays had dug themselves a 7-0 hole against the Yankees, a deficit that was seemingly impossible to come back from. But while the Red Sox were stuck waiting out the rain delay, something incredible started to happen in St. Petersburg. All of a sudden, the Rays went off for 6 runs in the bottom half of the 8th inning, culminating with a 3-run home run by Evan Longoria. And just like that, a 7-0 blowout suddenly became a 1-run ballgame once again. And things didn't get any better for Boston once play finally resumed in Baltimore. Just like the Braves did, Boston sent out their closer, Jonathan Papelbon, to go close out the game with a 3-2 lead in the 9th. But unfortunately for them, also like the Braves game, things wouldn't necessarily go to plan for the Red Sox. Papelbon did strike out the first 2 hitters of the inning, but he then immediately gave up 2 straight doubles to tie the game. However, when he got the next hitter to hit a line drive straight at the left fielder, it looked like he was going to get out of it and send the game to extras. But unfortunately for the Red Sox, Carl Crawford got a bad read on the ball off the jump, and even though he made a sliding attempt at the ball, it came just short, and he missed the catch by mere inches, allowing the winning run to come all the way in from second to secure the walk-off win. And to make matters even worse for Boston, just a little bit prior to the walk-off, Dan Johnson of the Rays hit a pinch-hit home run in the bottom of the ninth, completing the comeback, tying the ball game up, and sending it to extras at the Trop. Which means that at this point, all the Red Sox can do is return to their clubhouse with their chicken and their beer and do something unthinkable to them: root for the Yankees. But as much as they hoped for a momentum shift in New York's favor, I think even the Red Sox knew how this night was going to end up for them. And at 12:05 on the East Coast, Evan Longoria finally dealt the final death blow to the Red Sox season. Rays 8, Yankees 7. The Rays complete their comeback and make it to the playoffs for just the third time in their history, while the Red Sox complete one of the greatest collapses in September baseball history. All in all, it was a fitting and perfect end to what was one of the most incredible and intense nights of baseball that we have ever seen before. Even beyond being just one of the greatest nights of baseball ever played, this night would have a huge ripple effect on the future of Major League Baseball. For one thing, Boston's epic collapse in 2011 led to major changes across their front office and in the clubhouse, moves that would eventually pave the way for their 2013 World Series run. But of course, the biggest immediate effect was that it allowed the Cardinals to get into the postseason, and if they had not completed that epic comeback in September, we would have never gotten their iconic 2011 postseason run, one that culminated in David Freese's heroics in one of the best World Series of all time. Overall, September 28th, 2011 will go down as a perfect night in baseball history, one that we have never seen before, one that we will likely never ever see again, and one that we will be certainly talking about for years and decades to come.